There was some debate before the reverse retros came out that maybe the Canucks should go back to this look. The Canuck fans are like, you know what's wrong with this look? Do it in blue and green and it won't look ridiculous. Right. Uh-huh. Yeah, that's the problem with it. It's the colors. And it's been an ugly start to the season for some teams, so we're going to look at some ugly statistics. Tomorrow I will look at some pleasant statistics, and some of the teams that are on the board right now will show up under the pleasant statistics category as well. So when we look at which teams are struggling out of the gate, there are some numbers you can look at that may actually look better when you look at a team's record and the underlying stats. And we'll start with the power play, where St. Louis is not connecting on the power play. 11.1%. It's been a struggle. And the thing with St. Louis is the record's pretty good. So if they get that power play going, the record will get better. And it's surprising because they had a good power play last year. Pietrangelo leaves. Krug comes in. Krug has not had the same effect on St. Louis that he had on Boston's power play. And so here we are. Detroit, 10.5%. I think we expected Detroit to be statistically struggling in some of these categories because they don't have that superstar player up front yet. Anaheim, 8.3%. I could say the same thing with Anaheim, that a lot of their star players that are going to make this power play excellent have yet to arrive. And the Minnesota Wild at 7.1%. For Minnesota, it has been a disastrous start for the power play, and yet Minnesota's record's not too bad. So again, they can get that power play going, who knows. At the bottom of the penalty kill stats, Philadelphia at 70.7%. Philadelphia will want to improve that going forward, of course. But Philadelphia's record is excellent. So much like St. Louis there, if they can get their penalty kill going, that improves things that much more. Detroit, again, 68.6%. Not entirely a surprise. New Jersey at 67.7%. The odd thing with New Jersey's is they've had very good goaltending. So usually when you look at teams at the bottom of the penalty kill charts, you can say, well, their goaltending hasn't necessarily been great. I would argue that all of the teams at the bottom of the penalty kill have had pretty good goaltending for the most part early in the season. And at the bottom, Nashville at 63.4%. Nashville's penalty kill is a major problem, and it's one of the reasons that they're only 5-5 rather than having a record that's better than that. Or you can look at it and say, hey, they're 5-5. Their penalty kill hasn't been good. Once that gets going, things get better. Right. Goals for per game played. At the bottom of the list, Ottawa's scoring at a clip of 2.45 per game, which is ahead of the Islanders, who are at 2.11. Now, I don't expect the Islanders to be top 5 in scoring in the NHL, but that's not scoring enough at all. And I think Barry Trotz and everybody else would agree with that. Detroit, 1.91 goals for per game. That is problematic, but again, it speaks to the lack of that elite level forward that they need in order to get these stats to improve. And Anaheim at 1.73, not entirely a surprise. So goals for per game and power play, you have Detroit and Anaheim on both lists. And Detroit and Anaheim show up a lot on this board. Goals against per game, Pittsburgh's allowing 3.7. We know that they've had some struggles defensively to start the season. San Jose, 3.88. Not entirely a surprise to see San Jose on the board either. When you consider that Karlsson hasn't had that bounce back year that was expected, now we see them again leading the league in the wrong category, almost leading the league in goals against, and in the wrong direction. And Vancouver at 3.93 goals against. And yeah, I'm using the old Canuck logo for that one and wearing the old Canuck gear because it feels like the 80s when you see them near the bottom of that chart. And Ottawa at 4.55 goals against per game. A miserable start for the Ottawa Senators. They've had poor goaltending, poor defense. Maybe last night against Montreal, maybe that's a sign of things improving for the Ottawa Senators. Shots against per game, so who's allowing the most? This is where it gets interesting because you'll notice the goals against don't necessarily correlate with shots against except for one team. Shots against per game, Columbus allowing 33 even. Philadelphia's allowing 33.8, which is problematic when we talk about shots for in a moment here. Shots against per game, Chicago allowing 34.2. That was a problem last year as well. They were allowing too many shots. Notice they're not near the top of the board in goals against, though. And leading the most shots against per game is Vancouver with 36.1 shots per game against. So this is an overall issue, and thus the the jersey. Shots for per game. Anaheim near the bottom at 25.5, which matches up with the goals for. Detroit 25.3, also matches up with goals for. Dallas surprises me a little bit at 25.3, but there's been some inconsistent results, and that would tell you that the shooting percentage they have right now is not sustainable, so they're going to need to take more shots. And for Philadelphia, 23.7. So here's where things get really interesting with Philadelphia. They're near the top of the East, and yet they're on the board for having one of the worst penalty kills in the league. They're on the board for allowing some of the most shots and for taking the fewest shots in the National Hockey League. And yet they're being successful. So the underlying numbers would tell you we don't know how they're allowing 10 more shots per game than they're taking, but they're doing pretty well. And they don't show up on any of the scoring issue board part of this over here. So let's get into this. First period goals scored. Buffalo has only scored 5 so far this year. LA has scored 4 times. Nashville 4 times. And Dallas 3 times. Bit surprised to see Dallas on the board, and yet they've played fewer games than some of the other teams. It makes some sense. Goals against in the first period. Ottawa leads with 19. Pittsburgh and Vancouver have both allowed 15 goals in the first period. So for Pittsburgh, they're getting themselves into trouble in the first period. Their goals against per game is not as bad as Vancouver and Ottawa, so that tells you in the second and third those numbers improve, or they just don't improve for Vancouver and Ottawa. And then we get to the other periods and you go, yeah, all right. So second period, the fewest goals scored, the Islanders, San Jose, Nashville, and Columbus have all scored 5. So Nashville's on the board for the first period and second period. Fewest goals scored. They've combined for 9 in the first and second period throughout the season so far. And Vegas is at the bottom with 4. That's kind of a surprise to me. And yet, they have played fewer games than some of the other teams on the board, so it makes sense. Goals against in the second period, Vancouver, far and away the worst team in the league. 25 goals against in the second period. Ottawa, 17. And for Nashville, 16. So this is problematic when you've scored 5 goals in the second period and you've allowed 16. You're digging yourself into a hole. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say some of them have been power play goals against. Because, that's been a problem. And I know against Florida last night, their penalty kill had its struggles. So, yeah, that's definitely an issue. And then the third period, so this is where you're really looking for those big goals. San Jose, Ottawa, and the Rangers have all scored 6. Anaheim and the New York Islanders have scored 5. And what's interesting is this is the only period where Anaheim gets on the board. And yet, overall, they have the lowest goals for. So they're not far above Buffalo or the Islanders on these first and second period charts. The Islanders with 5. They have 5 in the second, 5 in the third. And here they are with goals for per game. And here's Tampa with 4. I'm going to say this before Tampa fans say, well, you know why we have 4. Yes, I do. Tampa normally has a lead going into the third period that's substantial, and they take their foot off the gas. So I don't have any kind of an alarm bell for Tampa Bay being here because they're nowhere on the rest of this board at all. And then goals against in the third period, Vancouver shows up again because they're gonna. But the Oilers lead with 19, so the third period's been a problem for the Oilers. Detroit, 17, so it's been a problem for Detroit. They're not on the board in the first or second. And then Philadelphia and Vancouver both with 15. So Philadelphia having trouble closing out games, like the one against Boston the other night. And for Vancouver, it's just been a disaster. Every single period, they are at or near the top of the league in goals against. So thus, the Canuck gear for this video. So yeah, tomorrow I'll discuss the teams that are at the tops of all of these lists. We'll see if there's any carryover if we see teams that are near the top who might also be near the bottom in other categories. But for teams you see on this board a lot, Detroit, Anaheim, Ottawa, Vancouver, it all adds up. That these teams would be the ones you'd see on the board a lot. Nashville is on the board a few times, and that has to be alarming for Nashville. They're on the board four different times. So, again, it's interesting to look at. I know it's early in the season, but I like to do stats videos here and there. And there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. And if you're a Flyers fan, does it bother you at all to see them on the board 4 times? Considering their record being pretty good? Is it accurate that maybe they're not playing as well as their record might dictate, but here we are? Or is it just that the games against Boston make this look a lot worse than it really is? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just haven't upon this video. And every time I wear this hat, people ask where I got it. My wife found it online. She got it on eBay for me 4 years ago. I've never seen it anywhere since. It's a Mitchell and Ness hat, because of course it is, because it's goofy looking, and it's the only hat that makes this look. Again, this wouldn't work in blue and green. There's no way to salvage this. This cannot be salvaged. And I don't know if this season can be salvaged either. Let me know your thoughts regarding that in the comment section below as well. And hey, happy Friday. I will talk to you again soon.